Hello, ladies. Great. I welcome you. Hi. There you are. Hi. Hi, Nana. Hi, Zuki. Good to see you. Hello, Goretti.
Good to see you all.
Yes, good to see you. You're very welcome to this session. It's very exciting to have you. We welcome our viewers who are waiting. They've been asking about you, speaking about this session. So I am very sure we are going to have a number of interested people who are coming in to listen in, and those who are already in listening in. This is our third day of the Literary Week of activities. Goretti, you're very welcome. I see Goretti. And I must pay tribute because the week of activities started when you were still here. So I pay tribute and I thank you for that you have gotten the time to be part of this conversation. Thank you, Zukiswa. Thank you for agreeing to chair this session. We are all really very excited, looking forward to the conversation, to listening to you all, to listening to Zimbabwe, Monica from Zimbabwe, Nana from Ghana, everybody. We've been getting a lot of inboxes. Oh, you have Nana, you have Monica, Zimbabwe. Yes, so we are really excited about this panel. To just speak about writing and how we interact with writing, not just as women, but as part of the rest of the writing world. So we really welcome you on behalf of FEMRITE. I thank you very much for finding time to be part of this. And I should also take the opportunity to thank the American Embassy, which has facilitated this process to allow us do this. And a big thank you to our technical team. Camera around and you saw the things surrounding us. It's a completely new world, but we thank God for the team that is managing, headed by Cliff. Thank you, Cliff. Yeah, he's across the room. So I will hand over to Zukiswa Wana, who is going to chair this session. I'll tell you just a little bit about Zuki. She is, I think for most Africans listening in and people beyond Africa, I'm sure most of you have read her. She's one of our most prolific writers with several publications to her name: Men of the South, The Madams, Cape, many. I think I can't even list them. And the other day she amazed us. She said that when she's not curating fun-filled and celebrate you, a few weeks back, Zukiswa brought to Nairobi, to Africa, as the first woman. She won, which I'm sure after Corona we should, because although we celebrated online, on Facebook, on Twitter.
Living under a rock. But if you haven't been living under a rock, then you will know that Nana Dakwa is from Ghana, and let us all excited. We also have Monica Zobacheru, who, in addition to being chair of Zimbabwe Writers Association, is also a writer in her own right. Very funny. Her writing is absolutely amazing and amusing. and she goes and questions certain things that most people will not. So Monica, please welcome to this panel. We also then have Goretti Chamiendo, who is the Director of African Writers Trust. And what's most exciting about African Writers Trust is they last year gave us like a publishing grant, which was very exciting for me to see that here is an African it for ourselves. And I will probably venture into asking about that. But Goretti is also a writer in her own right. She's contributed into a very exciting anthology, which is out here, The New Daughters of Africa, edited by Margaret Bursby. And then finally, but certainly not the least, we have Davina Kaoma, who I had the honor of having a workshop with some years ago. She is a fantastic writer. She's been coming up, and she writes for children and for adults, poetry, as well as prose. So welcome to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's okay.
Nana, you're furthest from us while we're in East Africa, so I'm going to start with you. Perhaps you could start us off by reading a little something from your work. Tease people. Why should we buy your book when it comes?
Woman, if you want to get inspiration from other women about how they have found a way to live their best sex lives. Even if you're already having great sex, you should buy my book so that you get some tips on women's freedoms. If you're interested in how to heal from any sort of sexual trauma, you should buy my book just because I think I wrote the book for all of us, for African women everywhere. I started interviewing women from different parts of the continent and diaspora in 2014 about the experiences of sex, sexuality, and pleasure. And that is what has been compiled into the book from the sex life of African women. I studies, and so I'm going to read from that. And one of the stories I'm going to read is actually my book. A few minutes, and if at any point in time you want me to stop, just put up your thing there.
Absolutely.
In IT, Voodoo is recognized as a national religion. The divinity of sexuality is close to the divinity of death, which is regarded in high esteem. On the Day of the Dead, usually celebrated in November each year, people do not go to school. If you walk the streets, you see people fall into trances, and at night, you hear voodoo ceremonies taking place all over the country. In voodoo, there are divinities and deities that reflect the spectrum of human experiences. Gods, goddesses, and in-between gender goddesses. Sexuality is vulgar, but not in the Western sense. Vulgar is blunt, courageous, verbal, and sexual. Physicality and the movement of bodies in dance is very sexual. Being able to do these vulgar sexual dances, even in high society, is regarded as culture. And Haitians are proud of their culture. In one way or the other, voodoo permeates all aspects of the culture, even among Christian conservative families and high socioeconomic groups. This was a backdrop to growing up Haitian before the internet. There was closeness to the land. My grandparents would take me to the countryside, and I'll see people bathing in rivers, people with their fingers and toes in the air, working the land. This experience of shamelessly seeing black bodies, of feeling the spirits of labor, of proximity to earth, has shaped how I look at my own black body. I was about 9 years old when I first touched myself. I thought this was a special thing that only I could do. I had the most powerful orgasms of my life in early childhood, and I could feel how powerful my body was. Nika lived next door to us. He came from a good family, years old, the same age as me. He was cute, the kind of cute you see on television. He would play his guitar, carry me on his back, and take me to the beach. He made me feel good about myself. He could see something in me that I could not yet see in myself. He would touch me, finger me, and eat my pussy with passion. It took a week of preparation before we both lost our virginity together. He had a perfect timing penis, making more gifts. One day, we were on the bus heading to the movie theater, which was several stops away from my house. No physical words passed between us, but when we got to my stop, we both got on the bus. I had never walked 3 blocks so fast before. We opened the door, our lips found each other right through the door, and there we stayed. Time went by in a blur of pleasure. I have no concrete memories. It was like a smoke-filled dream. Learning each other's bodies, our lips clung to each other, and we twisted and turned our legs so that our legs could rub against each other. I screamed and screamed and screamed as I could. And I think that would be a good moment to stop.
Thank you very much for that, Nana. You know, as you were reading, my 15-year-old son walked out with a very embarrassed look on his face. And perhaps I should ask you a question as we get into this. As human beings, we are sexual beings, but yet there isn't that liberation, particularly now as Africans. We have a certain amount of holding back and thinking of sex as dirty and unclean and something in private, and so of course we don't negotiate. Sometimes sex, we don't negotiate good sex, we don't negotiate sex in its different ways. How political is sex for this country?
I think sex is highly political, right? Is the reason why governments try to legislate who we can sleep with. Is the reason why different societies have different morality standards. Why in some countries there are actually ministers of ethics who are concerned about what grown consenting adults are doing bodies. If we do not have the right to have sex with who we want to, how can we actually attain other freedoms, right? Even other freedoms in the public sphere. Yeah, I can't speak to this so. And so I think sex is highly political. And I think also, in a sense, being able to have good sex and being able to own your body, like I said before, is a path to freedom in every area of our life.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I am going to jump over to Monica, and I'm jumping over to her because I am aware of something, and that might speak to this. So Monica, can you give us your reading and, yeah.
Okay.
And welcome.
Thanks, Sukiswa. Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, technology has let me down. I'm still trying to download the actual story I wanted to read. It's from an upcoming collection called In Search of the Elusive O. That's a capital O. But anyway, I'll read something else from another upcoming collection. This one is called The Merrymakers, and this story is under the working title of Widow's Rights. There was no way I could have done that. Imagine sitting at the head of the corpse, killing every time some person comes in and falls on me, pretending that they wish they could have died instead of to die. I think I might have pinched that evil stepmother of his if she cried and tried to pretend that she was really, really sad that he's dead, when we all know that she could have killed him the moment she met him. I take another sip of the ice-cold Savannah Dry. I gaze into the golden liquids, looking for confirmation of the words that sound hollow to my heart. No, girlfriends, this is me you're talking to. You would have relished every moment. You would have cried with all of them. I would have sat there with you throughout the long bitter night, while figuring out the correct outfit for the funeral. It would be something wow, but not showy, just classy. And makeup you could elegantly cry in without smudging. So it's definitely no mascara and no fake eyelashes. To get just that balance between looking good, but not like you've forgotten that it is a funeral. Fiona is brutal even when she's making me laugh. Not that she's not compassionate, just dramatic if you want. And she believes that as a best friend, I deserve to hear the truth all the time, every time. Even when I would rather not. Yeah, you're right. But I still think Tendai would have loved this. A land land encompasses the people dotted around the garden, include groups more discernible formula. The flowers frisk their heads, enjoying each moment of their celebrity gaiety. Poor, poor blooms, death will soon take them, leaving just a flowing green lawn that they nod over. The kindly August sun creates a heaven of speckled shades. Rose beneath aroma fails to chase ghost of days past, and Tendai's face wants me from everywhere. To imagine that even Jake has been so sympathetic, really didn't expect him not to dismiss your crazy idea, much less work so hard to make it real, and turn up today. I continue. It is no secret between us that Jake barely tolerates me, and he has consistently blamed Fiona for introducing me to Tendai that fateful day. Jake has not found Fiona's guilt mitigated by the fact that it was a mere coincidence that sent Fiona and I to Fishmonger for a girls' lunch. How was she to know that a cousin by marriage would also be there? How was she to know that lightning would strike when she introduced her so casually? And which prophets could have forewarned her that Tendai and I would be tearing each other's clothes off at my apartment that very day without any discussion of safe sex or life after fornication? You are mine, I am yours. I don't know how we are going to do this, but I'm not letting you go. Tendai had looked straight into my eyes, with his flesh still deeply anchored in mine. The heat of the moment lingered in the tangled limbs and sheets. It was heavy in the musky air. 6 years had flown by. Not fine. As long as Tendai was alive. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Monica, for that interesting read. A question to you, because it's the thing that stood out to me in all this steaminess, is friendship between women, you know, and how often women are blamed, you know, for influencing other women. Can you say something about that? Because I see it in there, and I've seen it in your other writing, on your Facebook posts sometimes. Can you tease that out?
Yeah, definitely as women, it seems we have collective responsibility for each other's sexuality, according to the society that we live in. If I'm friends with you, and you do something sexually that society does not approve of, maybe you have a lover that people think you should not have. Someone is my fault. But for all I know, maybe I don't even know about this affair, I'm hearing it with everyone else. If you're a married woman, and God help you, you have a friend who is not married. Anything you do in that marriage is because of that friend. And vice versa, some married women don't want single women anywhere near them because she might snatch my husband, you know. So I really don't know why as society we cannot just look at women as every adult, as a responsible person who makes choices about their sexuality and everyone, and whether or not we think it's wrong or right, it's not our choice, it's the individual. As long as they're doing it with people who are old enough to consent, and personally I would rather it's behind a closed door, and they're not causing harm in the sense that there's no crime going on, then why can't we just let people be? My thoughts.
Thank you very much for that, Monica. Gorati, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to come to you because of the story of being your sister's keeper, which is something that you actually highlight in your piece that you put in New Daughters of Africa. And so maybe let me start by asking you to read, and then we can have I can throw a question to you regarding that. I think you're muted. You're muted. Daisy.
Can she get unmuted?
Okay, you are muted now. There you are. Am I the only one who can't hear Goretti? We can't seem to hear you for some reason.
We can't hear
Hello?
Goretti.
Yes! We can hear you now.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yes.
I look up the microphone. Okay, hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Goretti.
Hello, everyone. Let me just put up my volume so I can hear you too.
Fantastic. I think we should just
When I arrive at Entebbe Airport, I expect my whole family to be waiting to receive me. After all, I have spent 7 years in America, and I know they are as anxious to see me as I am to see them. But only Hajat, my big sister, is waiting to welcome me. Where is everybody? I asked Hajat. Hajat says nothing, and I repeat the question, trying to keep my calm and wondering what could have happened to my mother, 6 siblings, their spouses, children, and other extended family. Hajat doubles her stay instead, aiming for the vending machine to pay for the parking ticket. I'm right behind her, and before she can insert the ticket into the machine, I grab her shoulder, forcing her to stop and look at me. "They'll see you next week," she answers. "I gave them the wrong date for your arrival." "What do you mean?" Hajat waits for the machine to discharge the ticket before answering. "I'll explain in a minute. Here, let me help you with the luggage. My car is over there." As she pushes the trolley with my 2 suitcases, a medium-sized one and my hand luggage, Hajat struggles to keep pace. I don't feel I'm walking as fast as I normally do, but Hajat complains and asks if I think this is America. "Why did you give them the wrong date?" I press on as I wait for Hajat to open the car. It's black and shaped like a coffin. I've not seen this type before. Toyota Noah. I read from the inscription in its screen. "Is this all the luggage you traveled with?" Hajat asks me as I help her place the bags on the back seat. The Noah has no book. "Yes," I nod my head, looking directly into her face. Her eyes, I notice, seem to be the only feature that hasn't changed about my sister since I left, and since she became a Muslim, after marrying me and started wearing the hijab, and we started calling her Hajat. Her eyes revealed the sister I knew then, collected, sensible, and forthright. It wasn't like her not to tell the truth. "Why did you lie to them?" I'm still on Hajat's case, and I refuse to take any further step until I get to the bottom of this. Hajat is supposed to tell me there and then, as we stand head to head on the hot car park tarmac. "That picture you sent me last month, I mean, what would people say? That you live in America or South Sudan? You'll stay with me for a while. I have arranged for the salon woman to come over tomorrow. Fix your hair and nails and face. They'll see you next week. As for your weight loss, I'm on a diet. I've been struggling to lose weight for almost a year now, and I'm finally happy with the results. And I want to protest about Hajati's plan of hiding me and the proposed makeover. But I don't. It's the way she talks, the way she carries herself, and perhaps it's the hijab, which I'm seeing her wearing for the first time. The hijab has created a barrier for our communication and an uncertainty about how I deal with her. It's like I don't know who my real sister is anymore. People are like water. When did this city become so crowded? The cars stretch as far as the eye can see. The borders zoom past at an unbelievable speed. "Ya Rabbi Mungu," Hajat swears as she dodges a huge pothole that has, "Wallahi, I'm going to crush somebody," Hajat hisses. She drives on neither the left nor the right, but where there are few obstacles. I hold onto the dashboard, grateful for the strength of the seat belt. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, when I was reading that the first time, I laughed out loud.
She's muted.
She's muted.
When I was reading it, I've seen brands of Toyota in East Africa, in both Uganda and in Kenya, that I have not seen anywhere else on this continent. So thank you for that. But you know, your piece is, you know, on the surface it just seems like it's a story about a sister coming back home, but it's also very deeply political and very deeply critical of the society that this woman is coming in, you know, the expectations of somebody coming from the abroad, you know, and then me, I just come for 7 years,
Yeah.
and she's just coming with one bag. Why?
Yeah.
Where's the gift for everybody?
Yeah.
You know? and then her observation of like the portals and stuff with a very, she's an insider, but now she's an outsider looking in, isn't it? Can you talk a little bit about that, about the very simple way that you write about your characters in a lot of ways, but the very deeply underlying political questions of their humanity, their femaleness, if you will.
Yeah, so when I wrote this short story, I was looking at two sides of it. So on one side, it's I've spent the last 10 or so years living in between London and Kampala. And whenever I come back to Kampala, I'm more, you know, I'm more intrigued, or I'm more aware of the similarities between London and Kampala more than the differences. So when the story goes on a little ahead, this character finds that she's been away for 7 years. Okay, I've not been away all 7 years, and I come each year. But it's almost the same thing, that now there is takeaway in Kampala. You know, you can order, and there is something called Jumia food, which can deliver to your own home. And all the fast foods, the McDonald's, the KFC, the Pizza Hut. So for me, it's very saddening that there isn't much difference now between certain aspects of London lifestyle and the aspects of Kampala lifestyle. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, you are right that this character is coming to a home. She's been away for 7 years. And she, notices, for example, the borders, which were not here when she left. Then notices the potholes, which were here when she left, but look more pronounced, because you're coming from an environment where there's no pothole. So you suddenly see potholes, yeah, but which were there when she left. And so many people get on the street as if they are fleeing the war. And then the other aspect, which is if you live away from home, you don't really take much notice of how your appearance is. I mean, you can put on your jogging pants and dash to the supermarket. And when you are home, you always, try to look very nice. You don't know what to bump into. Appearances matter. Societies in Africa. So that's why the sister is so. Yeah. So the sister says, "What will people say? You have to look the part. You have to look American. You can't really look like somebody else around." So there are all those underlying issues when I wrote this short story. But that was the main purpose behind it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I had a similar incident where I was going and I was telling my mom. She said to me, "Send a selfie," and I was at the airport and I was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. And she said, "This is why you're randomly selected." Because you're not looking serious, you must wear a suit, And I was thinking, who does that? But yeah, absolutely. Davina, let me come to you. Variety just highlights the stuff that we deal with. you know, in and amidst just surviving, not just Uganda, but this continent. I mean, we've just recently had things are happening in Cameroon, things are happening in
Mali.
In Zim, things are happening in South Africa, things are happening in Namibia, in Nigeria, and it's something very real to a lot of us, because for those of us who are mothers, who are sisters, who are children, we're constantly being the ones who have to help out. But yeah, so I want to hear about the politics of tear gas and the way women negotiate this. But perhaps first, give us a little reading from your work.
Okay, thank you, Zuki. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm glad to be here. I'll start with an apology for my video. The webcam app for this machine is malfunctioning. I troubleshoot as best as I can and still nothing. So apologies for that. There's no feed. So I'm reading from a story I'm working on called The Hills Are Fine, and it's really about what you're saying, Zuki. I've been thinking a lot about, brutality and tear gas and what is in it, and when people spray these things into the public, what are there any health aside from the obvious, physical problems associated with, like if a tear gas canister hits you, of course you could get injured, but also would it be that there are respiratory problems associated with tear gas and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to read the first 3 paragraphs from the story. The African Latinos, about how the world has no business referring to you and her, proper Africans, as black people. Lesson 1. It takes between a few seconds and a few minutes for a non-violent demonstration against police brutality to turn into a violent demonstration of police brutality. Lesson 2. It takes the sound of coming, of strange rains or migratory locusts, the laws of crowd control. First come the metallic cylinders, shaped like the bells of Ireland, deep prolonged sounds rolling in the dirt like children's playthings. Then the public displays of thick smoke, first the color of gooey egg yolk, later the color of blackened chicken breasts, followed by forced errors, forehand drives and backhand slices from the protesters. Shaped cylinders are lifted off the ground and into the air, bouncing off linked chains and wheeled vehicles like shuttlecocks, rotating back to the armored police vehicles from where they came. Next come the bullets, shots volleyed past the network of grouped buildings and into friendly, peace-loving neighborhoods. Then the different bodily reactions, rising and falling, falling and rising, occurring through and past darkened smoke. It's like football, but without a ball, your friend says, above all the movement coming at her through your phone. The non-rhythmic thrusting, kicking, blowing. It doesn't matter where one lands. Whether inside or outside the line, no one will remain untouched. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Davina. It has generally been when war, they always talk about how, they always talk about how deadly it is when women and children are the ones who are injured. And yet, when you think about it, on the surface of it, a lot of our countries are not in a state of war, and yet very much in a state of war. Can you talk about how we negotiate? Should we fight back? Should we find a way of learning using our netball skills to catch the tear gas canister and throw it back and whoever is throwing it to us?
So I'm really the person who sort of whose activism is really more keyboard-like. So as a writer, I think where writers come in, at least what I'm trying to do is sort of to reorient the discussion, because I see lots of people on Twitter who are changing this too much. While we are reporting, for instance, incidences of brutality, which pictures should we include and which one should we not? Because also while we are depicting violence, we should be careful to not also sort of ingrain a certain kind of attitude towards violence. So as writers, I feel that that's sort of where we enter the discussion. One, to help people make connections, because I think some people think that that's really only the job of a politician, but I feel like the way I've made connections is really through fiction, reading people who through different characters, fictional characters, but of course who resemble people who are going through events that how they negotiate and how they make connections between state economics and the protest that was interrupted by tear gas. So I feel like what I do and what I encourage writers to do is sort of reorient that conversation so that because they are writers who are powerful and who are listened to, and if they went onto their Twitter page and said something, 100,000 of their followers would begin to think, maybe this is a conversation we should be having. So for me, I'm more interested in how we help people make connections and how we help reorient discussions about violence, representations of violence, and effects of violence.
All right, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that's linked to perhaps our topic for the day, which is a question that I want to extend to all of you who are my panelists. On a continent where, we pretty much know who Zari is, for instance, but few people can be said to say who are not in the literary world, who Monica is, or who Sabina is, or who Nana is. Do you actually believe that writing has a social impact, or are we speaking in an echo chamber?
That's a good one. I do. I don't think that the impact is as quick and as fast as people want it to be, but I do think the impact is there. I'm speaking from my own experience, the ways in which I have been required to either engage or disengage with certain communities and conversations have all been influenced by things I've read. Yes, I do think there's a place for that for writers, but I think people aren't as patient with writers, because if there's Zari and then there's me, technically, who is going to listen? So I think that ours is slower, it takes a bit more engagement, it takes a bit more work, and I fear that few people are willing to engage in that work because, if there is a fake news, article on WhatsApp that's spreading, what are the odds that that's going to spread slower than your fiction piece about violence in colonial Africa? So I think it's a matter of degrees. I do think the impact is there. I don't think it's as fast, and I do think therefore there's a temptation to think that the impact is in there, but I think it's there. At least in changing the way we think about certain issues.
Nana, you have worked in civil society. You have written. You have been a communicator. Do you actually think that this has social impact? That your writing has social impact? Are you just speaking to us who are readers as well as writers, What's the impact?
I would like to believe that writing has social impact for many reasons. I think writing can inspire people to activism. When I think of my own life, part of the reason I'm an activist is because of the books I read when I was around 19 years old on feminism. At the time I'd just moved to London, I was now beginning to grapple with race in a way that my privilege in Ghana hadn't allowed me to see before. And I was reading books by people like Bell Hooks, Alice Walker, and then later on I started to explore African feminists like Ahmad Seydou. And I just had so this is the reason why the world is the way it is. And that inspired me to try and want to make a difference, in my own small way. And part of that for me is also about writing about issues around social justice, writing the issues around gender. And I think, part of what makes a difference is how popular that article becomes, whether it's because it's published by mainstream media or how popular that book becomes in terms of making more of a mass impact. But I absolutely feel like writing makes a difference. And especially, I think even activists, if they also write, whatever you write, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, your activism will come across, and the ways you describe the character and the issues it has to be overt. So I don't even think it has to be really overt.
Thank you very much. Monica, the same question to you. Somebody says to you, you make a comment about a certain thing or you write about it, and then somebody says, well, maybe you're on social media and they know that you write fiction. And then they say to you, Monica, stick to your fiction. Don't be coming into politics yet. You know. Is that a form of impact, or is it just like really being dismissive? Because I've seen it happen with quite a few writers when they try maybe to speak up in certain spaces. Your thoughts? Is it impactful, or do they fear it, or do they just think, hey, these people who are frivolous, who are doing nothing, you know, and they just want to opine on anything because they can write? A few sentences.
On that one, I'm going to have to speak for me personally as an individual. I'm fortunately in a very happy space where I'm very active on social media, and I can express my opinion about anything, and people will engage me on the issue, and not because of who I am. Well, that does come in because I have decided political limits, and I don't apologize for that. So, yes, but people engage me on the issue, not because you're a writer of fiction, not because most of my social posts are about sex. If I'm talking politics, we talk politics. If I'm talking the economy, we talk the economy. But on the other hand, getting back to your original question about the influence of writers, I must confess this is something that I'm personally worried about. If you look at the that is promoted internationally, it's like it has a certain slant for it to make the grade. And so the story of Africa is defined by that. And I think actually you then find that writers whose stories are supposed to be definitive about Africa don't connect to the people on the ground. For example, someone wrote a book about Zimbabwe a few years ago that was very popular with the international community. But it was not the Zimbabwe that we know, that the us who live here. So I think maybe as writers we also need to consider who are we writing for. If we want to connect with the ordinary person, are we telling the story of the ordinary person? Or are we telling the story from the perception of another audience? And if it is for that audience, how much impact are you going to have on the people that you actually live with, the people that you live among? It's just a question. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that, Monica. You are chair of the Zimbabwe Writers Association, which is the Zimbabwean chapter of the Pan-African Writers Association. So my question is, so the West says, you know what, we like Zukiswa who's saying this and that, and she's talking about how she drinks her whiskey and whatever, which is not the average life of whatever. But what are you, as Zimbabwe Writers Association, doing to promote that other story? Because obviously they exist. You know writers who are writing them. What is your organization? And perhaps by extension, I know you can't speak for the parent organization, but I'm sure you've had the conversation. What are your plans? What are you trying to do to ensure that that authentic voice that you say is not being heard is heard?
Not much, I must admit, because at the moment, the Zimbabwean book industry is facing a lot of challenges, and one of those is fragmentation between the different aspects: the publishers, the booksellers, the writers, the authorities. Everyone is pulling in their own corner, and what you then have is that if you don't have money, it's very hard to influence what people write. And where does the money go? It goes towards the story that we think needs an alternative too. The only thing we can do at this moment is to encourage writers to think. For example, the story of protest in Africa and the brutality and everything. As writers, let's also look beyond Africa, the rest of the world. What is happening? What was happening in the United States when they had the protest? Is there a country where they say, okay, people can protest and the security guys come out and shake hands and give out water and biscuits? You know, that sort of thing. And also ask, who is benefiting from the protest in Africa? So what we have is we have discussions where we try to push the envelope, get people to the square, the template, so to speak, to really start asking the questions that, is Africa really this generic story of war, of protest, of hunger, of poverty? And also, maybe we should stop writing stories that have meanings, stories that have impact, and just write stories for fun. And it is, just relate to them, they want to laugh, they want to escape, they just want something that they can relax with at the end of the day. So actually I think that would be higher impact because you're somehow playing in a very relaxed way. Instead of coming to them to say, hey, come with a message. Now listen, this is very serious. We must go to, I don't know. So basically we are just trying to encourage that through discussions and everything. And I'm happy to see that there are a number of books that are coming up that are breaking this mold of the poverty porn or the war porn, so to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Monica. Go on to Boretti and ask the same question, but perhaps relating it to what Monica has said. There are those who say, as Africans, we laugh entirely too much, you know? We make a joke out of everything. In the what you call it, and we're always consistently making a plan, you know? So for instance, if somebody says, somebody says, oh, there's petrol is going to increase, you know, some declaration comes from the government. We know that we can't afford it, you know, but, you know, we then make a little joke about how the person who made the presentation was speaking English or something crazy like that, as opposed to like questioning why petrol prices were going up when we live on certain under certain conditions that we don't make near enough money. But perhaps you can talk about that. Do you think writing has a social impact? Do you think it needs to have a social impact? You know, do you agree with Monica that maybe we just, you know, let's laugh a little bit more serious, let's, you know, or do you think that there's a way of marrying these two together?
So for me, it's pretty obvious that writing is powerful. Writing has social impact. As the saying goes, that the word is mightier than the sword. So I totally believe that. I also believe that if writing wasn't that serious or impactful, why then do the powerful men, why do they keep hounding the writers? Why do they keep, you know, chasing people from their countries and exiling them? So for me, all that points to the fact that writing is powerful, writing is impactful. You know, for me, there's no question about it whatsoever. If I look at my own writing, I didn't set out when I published my first novel in 1996. I never set out for what it eventually became or what it made me in the eyes of the young people that I was writing for. This is a story of an African romance where a young teenager gets pregnant. Of course, she's a young teenager. Teenager is a young person. So a teenager gets pregnant while in school, and all the consequences that come with that. So when that book was published, it's on the reading list of most schools in Uganda. You know, to these young people, I'll become an auntie, I'll become a sister, I'll become a mother, I'll become a counselor, I'll become a teacher. because some of them will call me or write to me and tell me, oh, Auntie Goretti, I think I'm pregnant. And then I ask, why are you telling me that? He said, because you wrote that story where the protagonist gets pregnant and she finds a way out. So that is my own personal story. But speaking to, it was Monica who raises the issue of what gets published, of how African stories are published in the West. This is an ongoing conversation, and I think as African writers, we really have to look at it more critically. Because I agree with Monica that it's not what we are writing, but it's what comes out in the end. And for me, it's not even what gets published, it's what gets canonized. Who is setting these canons for these powerful books? It's not even what's getting canonized, it's what is getting validated by the West. So all these things are true, but we need to do something about it. Because
perhaps maybe I can just, sorry to cut you, but just follow up with this. What is then our duty? Why so worried about what the West thinks? What is our responsibility in canonizing some of these things?
Yeah, because what happens when the West picks up an African story or an African manuscript, we have to remember that they are looking out for, one, their readers, two, their markets, three, sales. So they are looking out for all these things. And we as African writers are just falling into an already established machinery that gets behind the book once it's published. I think it was the late Osman Sembene, for me, who put it so well when he said that as African writers, the West is our market, Africa is our audience. So there is a discrepancy between these two. And I don't think we should continue blaming the West for doing this. We have to create our own publishing centers. We have to own our own publishing processes. We can't keep looking up to London or Paris or Sydney or whatever the big publishing centers are. We have to create them ourselves on the continent. We have to create our own centers of gravity so that we can own what we write, what gets published, what gets canonized, what gets on reading lists, what gets validated. If we don't do that, we can't continue blaming the West. They are looking out for their own. When I published my third novel with an American publisher, I remember I was thinking like this. I got into a real big fight. In the book, there is a song of the dove. I grew up in a rural setting in a small town called Hoima in western Uganda. And when I was about 3, 4, 5 years, we used to sing along the dove. We had our own interpretation of what the dove sings. So I put this in the novel, and then my American editor and publisher were saying, you have to translate it into English. And I said, I wouldn't know how to translate it. Because this is something we completely made up as children, and I don't have the equivalent of these words in English. And there was a deadlock. Either I translated that small, it was about 4 or 5 lines, or they would not go ahead to publish the book. So, and from that experience, I came to understand, because my publishers, biggest market and audience are American universities. Because this book is now taught on quite a number of American university syllabus. So they were telling me, students will not understand what you're talking about. And that's our primary audience. So from that experience, I've come to understand, if I had published that book in Uganda, nobody would question me. What does that song mean? The people would not understand because it is in my local language, but they would know that the dove sings and the dove has a message. Yeah, no, I'll stop there for now.
Okay. Now, I was gonna follow up by saying with African Writers Trust, one of the things that you have done is a publisher's grant and I right direction. Do we hope to see this happening more and more, or was this a one-stop, or it's fund dependent? How does that work? And given that our own our own governments in particular don't particularly fund the arts, you know, how do you, if you continue going on with it, how do you plan on continuing?
Yes, so I'll first talk about the fund. It is the African Publishers Fellowship Fund. So what we created at the African Writers Trust, and in part to respond to all these issues I've been talking about, that we really must start publishing and own our own publishing processes. So we start, it's a kind of 3-tier program. So we start with a training workshop and invite experts in the publishing industry, largely African experts based in the diaspora. So we've had Ella Wakatama, I'm sure some of you may know her. So she's been to Uganda several times to lead training workshops. So we work with emerging publishers. People we know are going to handle the manuscripts that writers are writing, because that's where one of the biggest issues is. That on one hand, there is an abundance of stories. There is talent, there is basic skills. So the writers are doing their bit. But who takes over these manuscripts and turns them into something brilliant? You need the input of a professional book editor. And there's a critical shortage of that on the continent. So that's what we've been addressing over the last 10 years. And we've created a pool of publishing professionals scattered over the continent. So we thought that was not enough. Because after the training workshop, what would happen, these guys go back to their respective countries and say, we have all this knowledge, we've done this experience and all these skills, so what do we do with it? And now this manuscript. So we raised funding to create a publishing fund, which is worth about $5,000, because it's quoted in euros. So this is competed for. We did a first edition, which was for East Africa, and this covered 11 countries of the East Africa and the Horn. So one person emerged as a winner, he was granted 5,000 euros. He's a young publisher from Mombasa. And as we speak, he's already published that book. So the aim of the fund is to enable the winner to publish a book that, speaks to international publishing standards. So that there's no excuse, because to publish a good book, you need the money. And the second edition was carried out, thank God, just before the lockdown at the beginning of March, and that was for the Southern Africa, and it was won by a young writer who is self-publishing. She's from Botswana. So at the moment she's working to publish the book. If it wasn't for COVID, we are moving to Ghana. Nana, we are coming to you. We are coming to Ghana to hold the workshop and then find the winner for Western Africa. So yes, it is ongoing here.
Thank you very much. That is absolutely noble. Sunyati, we have Sunyati in the house. Congratulations. She just went into reprint less than a month after her book came out. So Sunyati, a family affair. Well done. Right. Nana, I'm going to go to you and, and ask you the same question that I asked Goretti and by Satan as well, Monica. What do you think is, what is our responsibility towards the canonization of our work? And is there anything that's happening in Ghana that, that's worth talking about, that we can applaud, or is there anything that anybody in Ghana is planning to do?
Such a huge question for me, because I definitely feel like I'm in the category of, emerging writer. And my book is actually going to be published in the West, and that's because I didn't really see the publishers in Ghana that I could approach, right?
One moment. I just needed to highlight to you that according to Amat Aidu, we're all emerging up until the West calls us veterans. So these are actions. In the literary space, I've known you to be in the literary space ever since I've known you. So I'm sorry, I'm not buying the emerging, friend.
It's my own insecurities. But then in my case, for example, I knew I wanted my book to be published, right? And I knew I wanted it to reach a wide audience. Africa, and particularly for this book, African women were my audience. At the same time, there wasn't a publisher in Ghana that I felt I could go to. So I kind of went the route that I know that people in the West traditionally do in terms of finding an agency themselves with book. And there's certain things that I now know and maybe I would have done slightly differently. Okay, and I got some really good advice from Lola Shomegi recently about things I could have done. I didn't give world rights, no. I didn't give world rights, but I've sold Commonwealth and UK rights. And of course, that includes like huge tracts of the continent. And so now I'm like trying to have conversations with my agent about, no, I also want you to try and go back and renegotiate this. I think it's not so easy to do that now. So I think I'm learning. And so for me, I think maybe part of what we need to do is also to educate African writers, even if you decide to publish a book in the West, what are some of the ways in which you can negotiate, which rights should we sell, how do you negotiate to say, for example, Lola System, you could have said, I want to hold on to West Africa rights, I want to hold on to East Africa rights. It would be a lot more work, but for me, politically, if I had known I could do that, I would have done that, because for me, people on the continent are my primary audience, and now I feel like I'm going to have to do a lot of acting in my, they want to come to Ghana, they want to go with me to Nigeria, but I also wish I had thought about how do I work with African publishers alongside a publisher in the UK from the very beginning. And I think it's simply a lack of confidence, and also, being, a girl from Ghana who didn't even know what I could get an agent, who didn't know what I could get.
Nana, apart from what you've already said, I'm sure we have quite a lot of people who are looking to do their publishing deal in future. What is it that you tell them, apart from what you've already said regarding advice? What do they need to know?
Well, I think you need to ask for what you want, right? The worst situation is this way to say no. In my experience, when you ask for what you want, you don't really get the no. You're able to have a conversation and actually get to, it's not exactly what you want, sometimes closer to what you want, which I think is thanks to the advocacy of older African writers, right? And so
I'm like, there are people on this continent whose reality that is, so I don't find those discussions useful anymore, because I feel what's important to me is for people to have a freedom. I was in that space a lot a few years ago, and I had so much to say about so-called quote-unquote poverty porn, but now I really let people feel like this is the age for the novella for some reason. So I want people to take more risks, and to, if it's a novella, if it's a novelette, take a chance. Because if we don't take chances, then we can't do. But this very structured, it has to be a novel, it has to be so many words, or if not, it's going to be difficult to sell. We don't do poetry. I feel like that's also restricting the non-X's who nobody knows about, because maybe their form is the novelette, and maybe their form is the novella. It's not the novel, but because there's more risk taking. Yeah, I feel we already sold so many copies, but I feel like that
right, and who's supposed to do this risk taking, Davina? You and I, perhaps in different ways, we already have some platforms. Who's supposed to take these risks? Using our platforms, who take the risk? Who would expect to take the risk?
I am trying in a small way. I do interviews for an online magazine, and so one of the things I'm doing is to specifically seek out to interview writers who are not who are still emerging, quote unquote, or who haven't been invited to conferences everywhere and who want to know. So for me, that's my thing. I'm sort of going for the unknowns. If I feel their writing is interesting and I feel they are doing interesting things with form, I seek them out. Some of them don't want to be interviewed, and you can't force people, but that's my thing. Like giving, in that small way, giving space to people who haven't, secured a book deal for 10.
Okay, there's a question here from former Shita that I think might be for you, because you write for children as well. What are the developments in the children's book industry? And I will throw this question to you as well, Monica, because you are at Zimbabwe Writers Association, and I think that represents writing across, the broad spectrum of writing in Zim. Davina, start us off.
Children's writing here, a lot of what I'm seeing is sort of mixed run. There's an interesting illustrator who's, well, admittedly his illustrations on manga, the Japanese manga style, and he has a very interesting way of illustrating. And one of the things the conversations we've been having is, why don't you sort of quote unquote indigenize this? And he said, well, because currently, Japanese manga style is easier to identify, it's easier to sell, so I'm going with that now. But I feel like 5, 6 years from now, what would be interesting is how people are taking those art forms, that are very popular in different cultures, and sort of making them quote unquote Uganda. And I think that in the young adults and children's section, I think that would be very interesting, that is being brought to illustrate the stories. And that's where my eye is.
Okay. Monica, what are the developments in children's, what you call it? Because, we can't expect to have a nation or a continent of readers when they don't have anything they identify with as children.
For me and Zem, I think most exciting development in children's writing is one of our established writers, Ignacius Madaza. He's got a number of projects going on. But what he has done is he has taken the characters from the traditional Thor, the hare, the baboon, and he's placed them in modern setting. So instead of your hair being in the way Harare is navigating Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. So for me, I find that interesting, and the kids are picking it up. So it's like a marriage of our traditions, but also relating to the kids who are growing up now. And I've noticed that a number of cartoonists are picking up the concept. So we have an anchoring cultural imagination, writing for children with the same light voice, and also just not trying to divide to say this is traditional African culture, we are writing for the modern world or whatever, just being. I'm really excited about that. And I'm also liking that he's multi-platform. He's not just, he does live performances, he's got digital presentations, and part of it is also that he's adapting to events, and I think it will catch on.
Fantastic, thank you so much for that. Nana, you have a little young lady at your house. What books are you bringing to her? What are you reading to her? What is it that, what are you looking forward to? What are you missing in children's literature?
Yes, so I have an 8-month-old daughter, and I think I've been able to get some books I read to her and I read to her, but those books are targeted to slightly older children. And when the babies are like 8 months, they really need colorful picture books. So that's and board books ideally, because my daughter just loves to mouth the books. And so the books printed on paper get very wet, or she's likely to tear them. And I'm lucky, I have a global sisterhood, and lots of people have sent me books. And I like the stories I've been getting. So for example, I have books where people are talking about how mothers care for their bodies, and there are different types of mothers, and they use their bodies in different ways, right? And speaking about how mothers use, I want more books that depict the realities of the world to my daughter. My daughter's adopted, so I actually want books that present children as coming to the world and coming to parents in many different ways. But it's actually to write children's books, because I feel like, the way to bring up children, especially if you read to them, and I read to my daughter every day, is just to read to them stories of the way in which we want the world to be, and the ways in which for some of us the world exists, right? Yeah. And so I want more books. I want more books that show a world where we're living in harmony with, other people, and not books that always portray people as queens and kings, and some people as, lesser than. I want books that speak to social justice without necessarily using that language.
Thank you so much for that. Goretti, Hilda, Nana didn't hold on to her African right. Goretti, is there any development that you might know of in children's writing that you have observed? Is there something that you think is needed, that you can share with us? You're muted.
hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. This is all new technology to me. So I was saying that not particularly for children's writing. I did a bit of that at the very beginning, but I really don't have much information on children's writing.
All right, thank you very much. I am going to ask both of another question. You're a writer. What's your lifestyle as a writer? Because this is part of the, as a writer who is a woman as well. What's your lifestyle? Did you expect that this is how you live? Did you, is there something that you would warn people against and say, no, you know, you guys, you're going to be very broke, you're going to be very sad, you know? What would you tell somebody who says, Goretti, I want to be a writer, and I've seen you going to literary festivals. It must be so exciting. You travel. You must be rich.
Well, to start with, I'm not a poor woman. so that's what. So that's what I'll start with. But anyway, honestly, looking back, you know, I published my first novel in 1996, and at that time there were no computers, there was no email, there was no internet. There was no social media, so I started from a point where I literally had no expectations, and I was just writing this one little story which turned into a novel which I published. I picked interest in and published it. So for me, I came to writing, I think, slightly different to what most writers now are coming to writing from. I think my inspiration is quite different. And it reminds me that I get invited to speak to young people who are studying my first novel especially. And these are 14, 13-year-olds. And one time they asked their teacher, is Goretti still alive? And
yeah.
So I had to bare my teeth and say, look kids, I still have all my teeth, okay? But remember, these kids, you know, the book is twice their age. The book they are reading is quite, because it's now over 20 years. So I keep saying that writing to me came to me in a different way. So I didn't anticipate, I didn't plan, I didn't look what my writing life would be like in 10, 15 years' time. So for me, everything that happens, one, I don't take it for granted that I'm still here, more than 20 years when my first book was published. Some things have changed, some things have remained the same. So I would advise, and I think it was a good position because I was not writing to gain publicity, to travel when I used to get my invitations. And in those days, it was so good. I mean, I've been in Nairobi now, it's okay speaking to you. So you get this, there's a time. So I have to share this, that one time I got an invitation from Rio de Janeiro. And I just published my first book. And believe me, I didn't know where Rio de Janeiro was. And there was no Google. And they were addressing me as Professor Goretti Chomhendo. I said, wow. So these people really think I'm that important. And they did think I was important. And they sent me a first-class ticket from Kampala to Rio de Janeiro. So those were good times because I had never expected that I would travel to Rio de Janeiro in my wildest dreams when I was writing my first novel. But things have changed now. There is a kind prize, for example. There are all these writing competitions. There's the social media that has brought celebrity in writing. You know, some of the writers now are real pop stars.
Yeah.
They walk the red carpet. I've seen some of them who I don't want to name advertising lipstick on a British television. But he's a writer, he's a writer. So all these things were not there. So when I tell young people that I work with, when I go to schools, they don't believe me. that I started writing because there was no computer. I was handwriting my first book. The expectations have changed. Young writers or people who are writing in this era, they want a piece of that cake. I keep saying they want a piece of Chimamanda's cake. They want to be out there. They want to be pop stars. They want to earn the big money. They want to get the prizes. They want to travel. They want to go to the festivals. And which was not my case at all. So it's difficult for me to tell, one little story. If it gets published, you're okay. If it doesn't, it's still fine. Because now they have been, for lack of a better word, corrupted by all the goodies that come with writing. So it is a bit difficult for me to answer your question.
All right, no, that's fine. Monica, what led you to writing? Precious, we see you, Miss Waterbird. What led you to writing? Why didn't you I know you are a teacher and you've got all these other things, you're a journalist and stuff and everything, but then you're writing, why?
Honestly, I just drifted into it. It wasn't a choice. With the first story, I do short stories. I've tried to do a novel, it's complete, but I'm not happy about it. I think I'm a short story writer. So I'll have the story in my mind. And I think for 2 years, I didn't do anything. And then I'll just find myself compelled to wake up at 3 a.m. and put it down on paper. That's how Chili Sunsets was done. And I actually kept the manuscript, I think, for a long while after I had written it, before I even showed it to anyone else. So for me, it's kind of like a calling. And that's why even I do a lot of writing on Facebook, which is not really career-oriented or for any other purpose except that on that day I feel like writing, and I just write it and put it out there. That's me.
Okay, all right. Davina, what led you to writing? What have been your highlights? What have been your lowlights?
I had no dreams or any imagination of being a writer. I came into writing because I read a lot. I've always been a reader. So for me, it was just curiosity. What is it like to be on the other side of the page? So my lifestyle as a writer is just filled with reading and reading and reading and reading. So I encourage anybody who wants to read. I've had to cut out certain things with more time because I don't watch TV anymore. Or when I do, for a limited time because I have so many other things to do with my time. There are so many books to read. Sometimes I look at my bookshelf and think, oh my God, when am I going to read these books? And then you also have to read them differently because as a writer, you read differently. You want to see how did this writer create this effect, or how did they make this sentence beautiful. So now it even takes longer to read because now I'm looking out for, I'm reading with the eye of, what did this writer do? Another thing I would encourage anyone who wants to write is keep your day job. I think that balance is required because I know so many people who thought that, when I become a full-time writer, money will just start flowing. Actually, that doesn't work that way for many people. So I tell people, keep your day job. If you have to, write at night, for 2 hours from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. But there is a certain level of security that comes from knowing that there will be a paycheck, regardless. And it's hard to keep a job, but I feel like because you're not worried about whether your book is going to sell and recoup all the money you thought you were going to get, then there's a certain kind of stability that it brings to your writing. Of course, it's stressful and it's difficult to balance, but I encourage people to keep their day jobs. And I'm going to throw that word back, which could be using a lot. If you're emerging, quote unquote, if you're still emerging, please keep your day job. It will help. Yeah, so read a lot, have a source of income that is not tied to your books because that pressure, it will kill you. Yes, and also, what's the word? You take a use of the opportunities that Grace has talked about. We are so lucky to live in a time when you can self-publish. There's so many people self-publishing in Uganda, and for me that is interesting. There are Twitter poets. You can go to a digital publisher like Okada and publish your own book. 10, 15 years ago, the sort of opportunities we have now. And thank you every day I was talking to a friend, almost every day there is a literary magazine coming up that's asking for submissions, and they don't ask for fees. All you have to do is write a good story and send it to it. They'll recognize you, maybe opportunity. So I feel like this is such a good time to be a writer because there's so many opportunities. So I encourage emerging writers like myself to use those opportunities. Yes.
Okay, since you're insisting on the emerging label,
Yes.
do you recognize as a writing lifestyle? Can you point out if somebody is like, okay, this is a writer, can you point out, is there a particular lifestyle, is there a particular thing, does a writer need to have like dreadlocks or dirty clothes? What's the story?
It's interesting that you say that, Zuki, because when I was starting to write, there was this idea that writers are unkempt, they don't bathe, they don't wash their hair, and they're suffering, they're suffering souls because they carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, So, that stereotype. There are corners in Uganda where it still thrives, but I say bathe, be clean, wear perfume. Be a normal person, don't. Because I feel like there's so many writers who give us a bad name, Plus, there's a very pervasive stereotype of the sexualized, and Nana was, talked about sex. But now, the people who think all writers do when they're not, being brilliant, is like having orgies, I think those stereotypes are very interesting, but they are not really. I think there are more writers who are normal and well-adjusted and function normally than there are those who don't. But I feel like, because there's a certain romance that's brought to that image of the suffering artist, who spends a whole month in their room because they have to work alone and it's so solitary. Actually, we have friends and we go out, and we go to music festivals, maybe we are looking for stories, maybe we are not, but I don't know what else to say except some of those stereotypes are not true. Not everybody needs to have dreadlocks, and not everybody needs to serve.
Words. But you no longer have to wait for that and what you do for yourself professionally. Gwaleti was saying when she started, she did have to make a career. I think that was then, and also she was lucky. But for the young writer who is coming out now, the lifestyle is you have to have a proper career path. You have to know exactly where you're going, who you are, and what you want to achieve. At that point, you're just going to be one voice that's lost in the void, so to speak, because there's so many other voices. The digital world means anyone can be a writer today. Anyone can put two words together and call themselves a writer. So if you want to be outstanding, if you want to make money out of your skill, you really have to have a plan of how you're going to do that. But the good thing is you don't have to be like anyone else. You can choose who you want to be, what makes you happy, and occupy a space that you're comfortable with.
Mandela, good to see you here. And it's actually not true. I have to put a whole lot of acting before I come. I'm very much an introvert. So no. Nana, over to you. And the question I just wanted to touch on what Monica said, which is that because I know you've been doing this, you have been writing in other spheres for a living and getting paid for it. Can you talk us?
Writing for maybe magazines, newspapers, but that money would not have sustained me, to be honest. But I think for me, in terms of a writing lifestyle, motivated to continue writing, even at the time when I thought it would be impossible for me to get a book deal. And for me, that's the lifestyle of a writer. A writer surrounds themselves with a community of writers. And that's the one tip. And I also agree that you shouldn't give up the day job. There's so many times that I've been tempted to give up the day job, but I also think that the day job gives you the discipline to create the space to write. So a huge chunk of my book from last October when I finally got a deal was written as a writer. And when she was working for a couple of years, she actually wrote, she actually produced books while she was writing. And then she decided to take 2 years off to focus on her writing. She hasn't even done one book. And that for me was a lesson. I was like, okay, wow, I always have a job because I would force myself to create time to write. So that would be my suggestion. Oh, I have another suggestion that also works for me. Have writing days. So I have other writer friends that we meet and write. Like in this era, we'll meet on Zoom, have a conversation about what we're going to write, and write for like an hour and read what you've written to the other person and get feedback. And I find that also helps. And a pre-COVID world, I used to actually meet up with people, like say hotel bars, we'll buy a drink, we chat for an hour, and then write for another hour. That's something
You were just making excuses to go meet for drinks.
Yeah, but at least I'm also writing, you know, that's the whole point. So actually, I agree, you can meet up, that's drinking, and write.
This is the time to ask further. Elma, I stopped drinking with Corona. I've decided that I'm going to be healthy. So the only thing I drink is tea. I cannot relate to this conversation, but thank you for trying to draw me into it. Yeah. Yeah, you believe that, huh? Anyway, so we don't have much time. If any of you four panelists have questions for the other panelists or anybody in the audience would like to ask something, please go ahead. We don't have much time. We're about to wrap it up. Oh, my friend. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think I need to say something about the responsibility of a writer. I really believe that as a writer, your first responsibility should be to develop yourself. I think I'm following up on what Devina was saying about the gatekeepers. I think that's what she was saying. Who are the gatekeepers to literature, to writing, to getting published, to getting invited to festivals, you know, to getting into anthologies. There'll always be those gatekeepers. And that's how the world has been, and that's how it's going to continue to be. So for me, my advice is, as a writer, your first responsibility, develop yourself, invest in yourself, promote yourself. That should be your responsibility. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the person compiling an anthology or organizing a festival or inviting people or, you know, giving book deals. That should be up to you. If you believe, in order to develop my writing, in order to advance my writing, I need to leave the continent, for example, and go to where there are structures that promote writers. For God's sake, do that. If you believe I want to invest in the academic side of writing, probably register or do an MFA in writing or get a scholarship, do that. If that's for them to invite you, because honestly, I went to Zimbabwe for the first time in 1997. My first novel had been published, and my publisher wasn't doing anything. I have no literary agent. There was no structure that promoted writing, and there was no email. I keep emphasizing that there was no email there. I'm in Uganda, my book has just been published, I'd like to attend the festival. And I was invited. So I always push for that. That should be your first responsibility. Fight. Get yourself up. Yeah, that's what.
Because one of the things I have generally said to writers, to other writers, is that there are certain festivals, Ake Festival, Abantu, you know, FEMRITE, when things are still open and stuff, where I didn't need to be invited. I invest in it in the same way that, you know, people who love music go to concerts. If you love books, you should go to, you know, you should invest in going into a literature festival. But I do think, I wonder though, Goretti, something that you said, you mentioned going for like MFAs and you know, living the country. Don't you think that's a preserve of the privilege though, you know? Narumoru as an example, and they don't even really have internet. How then would they go about even going for it?
Yeah, I think it's okay. You know, one thing we really have to accept is that writing in itself is an elite activity. It is for the privileged. I think we really need to accept that. That is one. But secondly, I did an MFA which I fought for myself. I can understand that it takes time. I had wanted to do this for years. So I have to plan, I have to set.
Yes, it takes die with book.
Yes, I have to do things. I have to sacrifice. There is a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. There is a lot of personal investment. I keep saying I don't drink at all. So, I wonder for people who drink, how much does a bottle of wine cost? How much money do I need to save if I was drinking wine to invest in my own writing? So I don't, on one hand, believe that. And yes, we have sisters and brothers who are completely disadvantaged, who are in places of no internet. I started writing Zuki when there was no internet. I keep saying I invested 3 months of going to learn a typing course because my typewriter not in a laptop. So I invested in 3 months course. I had no job. I had no formal job. So I really don't think so. You need to invest in yourself. You need to fight for your career. I totally believe.
You got some questions here. To drink wine or to say for an MFA? That is the question. Thank you so much, everyone. I will start with the young, and I'm not being the population on this continent. Still younger than you, 19.4 years old, but you know 19 years old. We'll start with any last word? Any last messages of knowledge that you can share?
Yes, I what's great is said, investing in yourself. We have this discussion with my writer friends all the time about craft, If you have made the effort, it will show. You might not win a prize, but it will show. And you will reap the benefits. So my last word is invest in yourself. If you need to buy because I learned how to write by reading, learn how to write books. I mean, it was that interesting. Like I started seeking out second-hand books, some of them, with titles like how to write fiction or how to write poetry, and so those things, they help. I mean, they help me. Of course, there were the workshops and the groups with other writers that Dana talks about, but there's also the effort you need to put in yourself, which nobody else is going to do for. So that's my last word. Make the effort and do the work. You will reap the benefits. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask somebody. Before I continue, there's somebody from the audience. Ruth, you asked a question, and your question was, any plans to mentor the next generation? And I'm gonna ask then my question to you: what exactly do you mean by mentoring? Because all these women, in fact, every writer I know, by virtue of writing, are already doing a mentorship because. Every writer learns by reading. So what do you mean? Maybe you need to expand a little bit so that my analysts can answer.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I congratulate all the panelists. I'm speaking here from Abuja, Nigeria. What I meant by that question is that how do you get them young because of the social media? Maybe I didn't finish the question what I intend to. I didn't finish because I saw time is against us. With the social media, and most of the time you find the young ones are more attached to this media. How do you now mentor young people? Because if you discover most of the people they are the youngest, just as you said, you are winner. And I remember while growing up, I'm a lawyer, but I did literature. There was a time I wanted to become a historian to read history. And so how do you mentor, or how do you catch them young? Maybe perhaps would be the appropriate question to all the panelists. How do you catch them young in view of the global ICT technology? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw that to Monica because she is ZIMS Writers Association. How do you catch them young, Monica? How do we grow more writers in an age of Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and so forth and so on?
For Zimbabwe Writers Association, we are an umbrella body, and the bodies for young writers like we Zimbabwe, which actually has programs running in schools, and they go and they do trainings on the actual skills of writing, the soft skills, and other things. And we also, as established writers, go out and talk to the young people. Sometimes we have workshops with them, or just going out to visit. We also work with a number of libraries where people are interested in reading and writing gather. So it's generally about the personal conviction and how they want to mentor others. And I think generally as writers, we've all come through the hands of the people who established before us. Personally, I was grouped by Shima Chinojira until I got to a point where I actually edited one of his books. And I've just felt the burden of that, to want to pass it on to others, to help others. So it's in different ways. Informally, you look at manuscripts, you give advice, that sort of thing. But I believe generally in Zimbabwe, the writing community is very open and very embracing to the upcoming people, to the extent that we even have WhatsApp groups where established writers are members, and the young people post their work, and we all critique the writings, or on the forums that they like, that they operate in. But the structured approach also has its challenges, because some of the young people, they don't take criticism very well, because they believe they've made it, they believe this is the poem of the century, So anything where you say it's brilliant, but, feelings are high. So I think maybe we should actually come up with more structured programs to look at that.
Fantastic, thank you. Nana, last words. We have essentially like 2 minutes. So I'm gonna ask you for your last word, and I'm gonna ask Loretti for a last word.
My last word is that I don't think we should be fearful about social media. I think it's taking people away from writing. A lot of people are actually writing stories on social media. So I really think in terms of the next generation, meeting people where they are, encouraging them to explore new platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually think people like Sunyati, who's with us, became such bestsellers because social media could assist to put the word out about, the arrival of their new books and stuff. So I think there is a way we can work around it. Goretti, last word.
As a writer, write.